The man inside my house. For 2 years, Jenny and I had lived together in a luxurious hilltop villa that legally belonged to me. Every single detail of that house reflected my personality. From the architecture to the security system, I had personally designed everything. People often joked that I treated my home like a private fortress, but they didn't understand why. I wasn't obsessed with cleanliness. I simply believed that a person's home was the one place where no one should cross the line. The security system had 3 different levels of authorization. Housekeepers could only enter once a week during a fixed time slot. The gardener was restricted to the yard. Even my personal driver wasn't allowed beyond the entrance hall. Jenny knew every one of those rules. She used to tease me about them. "Eric," she'd laugh, "this isn't cleanliness. It's territorial instinct." She wasn't wrong. I never liked strangers touching my belongings, and I hated people treating my home as if it belonged to them. That was exactly why. The moment I returned from my business trip 6 hours earlier than expected, my world quietly began falling apart. The driver placed my suitcase beside the front door and asked politely, "Sir, should I carry it inside?" I shook my head. No. The mountain wind howled through the pine trees as I walked toward the villa alone. The fingerprint scanner recognized me instantly. With a soft mechanical sound, the massive bronze doors slowly opened. I stepped inside. Then I stopped. A pair of polished black men's leather shoes sat neatly beside the entrance. They weren't mine. For several seconds, I simply stared. Jenny knew I hated shoes being left around the foyer. She would never ignore something like that. Unless she wasn't the one who left them there. Before I could think further, I heard the sound of a coffee cup being placed gently on the kitchen counter. A young man walked out. He looked around 26 or 27. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. But that wasn't what caught my attention. He was wearing my slippers. The custom-made gray slippers that only I used. Even Jenny had never worn them. The young man smiled naturally, as if he had every right to be there. "CEO Tang," he greeted warmly. "You're back earlier than expected." Earlier than expected? Interesting. How did he know my schedule? Before I answered, he lifted the coffee mug in his hand. My coffee mug. The black ceramic one with the gold rim. "CEO Mu is upstairs changing clothes," he said casually. "Please have a seat. Coffee has just been made." His tone wasn't nervous. Wasn't embarrassed. It sounded like he was welcoming a guest into his own home. I looked quietly at the slippers on his feet. Then at the mug in his hand. Anger never helped me make decisions. So instead of exploding, I calmly loosened my cufflinks. The smile on the young man's face became slightly awkward. But he still didn't move. He even stepped aside politely. As I said, "Please sit." Finally, I looked directly into his eyes. "What's your name?" "Julian." He answered without hesitation. "I'm an architectural designer working under Jen." Jen. Not CEO Mu. Not Ms. Jenny. Jen. The nickname rolled off his tongue with disturbing familiarity. At that exact moment, footsteps echoed from the staircase. Jenny slowly walked downstairs. Her hair was still damp from a shower. She wore a loose home dress, the kind she usually only wore when relaxing at home. The second she saw me, her face froze. Not because she was happy. Not because she had missed me. Her very first words were, "Why did you come back early?" Not, "You're home." I gave a small nod. Then calmly raised my hand, pointing directly at Julian's feet. "My slippers." I looked at Jenny. "Who gave him permission to wear them?" Jenny frowned slightly. Before she could answer, Julian hurried to explain. "Please don't misunderstand, CEO Tang. My shoes accidentally got wet today. CEO Mu was worried I'd catch a cold, so she kindly let me borrow them. If you're uncomfortable, I'll take them off immediately." As he bent down to remove them, he glanced helplessly toward Jenny. Exactly as if he expected her to protect him. And she did. "Eric." Jenny sighed. "They're only a pair of slippers." I didn't even look at her. My eyes remained fixed on Julian. Then I asked the only question that truly mattered. "Who gave you authorization to enter my house?" The living room fell into complete silence. Julian slowly straightened up, his fingers still resting on the edge of my slippers. For the first time since I walked in, the confidence in his smile began to crack. Jenny calmly walked down the remaining steps and stopped beside him. "I gave him permission," she said. I looked at her without saying a word. She naturally stood half a step in front of Julian, almost as if she was shielding him. Maybe she didn't even realize she had done it. "He needed to measure the greenhouse for the renovation project," she explained. "It would have been inconvenient to keep calling property management every time he came here, so I gave him temporary access." "Temporary?" I smiled faintly. Julian immediately added, "Please don't misunderstand, CEO Tang. I only came here for work. I never intended to make you uncomfortable." He spoke with perfect timing, taking responsibility while making himself look innocent. Anyone watching would think I was the unreasonable one. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and opened the villa's security management system. Jenny's expression changed slightly. "What are you doing?" I ignored her. The authorization records appeared on my screen. Visitor, Julian. Access duration, 7 days. Unlimited entry. Unlimited exit. Authorized areas. Main residence. Garden. I forgot to change it. You forgot? I turned the phone toward her so she could read every word herself. He can reach the entrance to my study. Her expression hardened. But he can't enter the study itself. So what? That single sentence echoed through the room. So what? The place where I kept confidential business documents. The place where no employee had ever been allowed to approach. She thought it wasn't important. Julian lowered his head again. CEO Mu, forget it. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have come here so often. I definitely shouldn't have caused CEO Tang to misunderstand. His voice trembled slightly. His eyes even became red. If someone had walked into the villa at that moment, they would have believed he was the victim. I leaned against the entrance cabinet and looked at him quietly. Whether you had bad intentions isn't the question. Julian looked confused. I turned to Jenny. Did he stay here last night? Silence. Neither of them answered. But sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. I looked directly into Jenny's eyes. I was away on a business trip. And another man spent the night in my house? Years ago. When we first bought this villa, Jenny had hugged me tightly and whispered, "This home will only belong to the two of us." She even laughed while saying, "This is our home, not a hotel. No other man will ever stay here." Now, she had broken that promise herself. Jenny finally spoke, her voice noticeably colder. It was late. I couldn't let him drive back. He stayed in the guest room. I laughed quietly. A stranger wears my slippers. Uses my coffee mug. Walks freely through my house. Greets me like he's the owner. And you're telling me that's normal? Her patience finally snapped. Eric, can you stop making everything such a big issue? Julian is my designer. He's not some criminal. I looked around the villa. Then slowly met her eyes again. When did my house become your design studio? Neither of them answered. The silence between us became heavier than the mountain wind outside. At that moment, I finally understood something. The real problem wasn't Julian. It was the fact that Jenny no longer believed my boundaries deserved respect. And once respect disappears, everything else follows. The room remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. I slowly unlocked my phone again. If words couldn't explain the situation, facts would. With a few taps, I opened the master security panel of the villa. A cold electronic notification echoed through the house. Beep. Visitor authorization revoked. Julian's access disappeared instantly. His expression changed. Before either of them could react, I continued. Another notification. Beep. Housekeeper authorization removed. Gardener authorization removed. Driver authorization removed. Maintenance access suspended. Property management authorization suspended. One after another. Every permission connected to this villa vanished from the system. Finally, I selected one last name. Jenny Mu. My finger paused for only a second. Then, I pressed confirm. Beep. Owner authorization suspended. Jenny stared at me in disbelief. You revoked mine too? I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Yes. Her breathing became noticeably heavier. This is our home, Eric. I calmly shook my head. No. This villa is legally registered under my name. I simply allowed you to live here. And today, I'm taking that permission back. Without another word, I walked to the wall-mounted control panel. My fingerprint unlocked the master settings. I activated full security reset mode. Within seconds, the heavy electronic locks throughout the villa began resetting. The elevator shut down. The garage doors automatically locked. Every entrance was resealed. One after another. The entire house acknowledged only one owner. Me. I re-registered my fingerprint. Then the emergency security teams. No one else. Especially not Jenny. For the first time, she realized something she had forgotten. The villa had never obeyed her. It only obeyed me. Julian swallowed nervously before speaking again. CEO Tang, isn't this going too far? I slowly turned toward him. He immediately lowered his eyes. I pointed calmly toward the entrance. Why are you still standing here? He froze. I looked directly at the slippers on his feet. Take them off. And leave. For several seconds. No one moved. Then Julian silently bent down. He removed my slippers. Placed them neatly beside the door. And walked outside wearing only his socks. The moment the front door closed, I picked up the slippers. Walked to the trash bin beside the entrance. And threw them away. Jenny stared at me in shock. Eric. They're only slippers. I looked at the trash can. They stopped being mine. The moment someone else treated them like they were. Without saying anything else, I walked into the kitchen. The coffee machine was still humming quietly. My favorite black mug sat on the counter. There was still a faint coffee stain on the rim. Julian's fingerprints. His lips had touched it. I picked it up. Looked at it silently for several seconds. Then, I released my hand. Crash. The ceramic mug shattered inside the sink. Pieces scattered everywhere. Jenny flinched. Are you insane? It's only a coffee mug. I picked up a towel and calmly wiped my hands. To you, it's just a mug. To me, it's another reminder that someone crossed a boundary they never should have crossed. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to suppress her frustration. Julian didn't even know it belonged to you. I nodded slowly. You're right. He didn't know. Then I looked directly into her eyes. But you did. Those 4 words left her completely speechless. For the first time since I arrived home, Jenny had no answer. I turned around and walked toward the hallway leading to my private study. Something didn't feel right. And I intended to find out exactly what it was. The housekeeper had cleaned the entire house yesterday. Everything should have been exactly as I left it. But it wasn't. Outside the study, a faint trail of dried mud stained the carpet. Almost invisible. Most people would never notice it. I did. I crouched down for a closer look. The footprints weren't mine. They weren't the housekeeper's either. Someone had stood outside this room recently. I slowly reached for the doorknob. A thin layer of fingerprint oil reflected under the light. Again. Not mine. Jenny's breathing became noticeably heavier. I entered my password. The heavy wooden door opened slowly. The study looked perfectly normal. Books remained neatly arranged. The computer was exactly where I left it. The curtains were still closed. At first glance, nothing seemed different. But appearances could lie. I walked toward my desk. Every file in this room had its own position. I never relied on memory. Everything followed a system. Within seconds, I found it. The survey report for the East Suburb Development Project. Originally, it had been stored beneath the 3rd folder. Now, it rested beneath the 2nd. Only 1 position higher. A tiny difference. But enough. Someone had touched my documents. I slowly pulled the file out. Behind me, Jenny remained silent. Without turning around, I asked quietly, "Did Julian enter my study?" "No." Her answer came far too quickly. Too naturally. I smiled. "Then why are you nervous?" She frowned. "Because you're acting like a police officer interrogating criminals." I turned to face her. "And shouldn't I?" She crossed her arms. "He never entered." I took the blueprints outside myself. He only looked at them. I stared at her for several seconds. "You removed confidential documents from my private study and handed them to another man? They were only renovation plans. I'm your wife. I had every right." Every right. Those words echoed through the room. I finally understood. She genuinely believed marriage erased boundaries. She believed my property had automatically become hers. She believed my permission was no longer necessary. Looking into her eyes, I realized something even more disturbing. She knew exactly how much this would bother me. She simply didn't care. Or worse, she wanted me to react. She wanted to prove my boundaries were unreasonable. She wanted to win. I slowly placed the file back onto the desk. "The problem," I said calmly, "isn't Julian." Jenny looked surprised. "He's young. Ambitious. He wants success. He wants influence. That's normal." I took 1 step closer. "The real problem is you." Her expression instantly darkened. "You knew every one of my boundaries. You crossed every single one anyway. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to prove you could." Jenny laughed softly. "So now discussing work with a designer is some terrible crime?" I shook my head. "No. Disrespecting your husband is." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Jenny sighed. "You always think you're right. You always think everyone should live by your rules. Marriage isn't supposed to be like that." I answered quietly. "No. Marriage is supposed to be built on respect. And respect begins with boundaries." She looked away. Neither of us realized That this conversation had already changed everything. Because once respect disappears, love rarely survives. That night, just before midnight, my assistant forwarded me a screenshot from social media. The photo showed the night view from my villa's terrace. The city lights. The mountain breeze. A wine glass resting on the balcony. The account belonged to Julian. Its caption read, "Some people understand great design and beautiful nights." The internet didn't need much imagination. Within hours, rumors exploded across the business circle. People were already saying that Jenny had brought her young designer to stay at the hilltop villa. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then smiled. Very well. If they wanted to play with public opinion, I would answer with evidence. The next morning, I called my legal department. Prepare 2 lawyers' letters. One for Julian. And one for the media account that started these rumors. Then I opened my notebook. On a blank page, I calmly wrote 2 words. Second time. The first boundary had been crossed inside my home. The second had now become public. 3 days later, I attended a design exhibition on the west side of the city. Originally, I had no intention of going. But that morning, my secretary informed me that Jenny's design studio would be unveiling its newest luxury residential project. The moment I heard the project's name, I changed my schedule. Because I knew that project better than anyone. Months ago, Jenny and I had designed its foundation together. We had spent countless late nights discussing every detail. The building orientation. The greenhouse concept. The mountain view circulation. The rooftop terrace. Those ideas weren't just blueprints. They were the result of hundreds of conversations between husband and wife. Back then, Jenny had smiled at me and said, "This will be our first masterpiece together after marriage." I believed her. Standing inside the exhibition hall, I slowly looked toward the giant presentation screen. Then, I froze. Displayed beneath the project title was only one name. Lead designer, Julian. Not mine. Not ours. Only his. For a few seconds, I simply stood there. The applause echoed throughout the hall. Julian confidently walked onto the stage wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. Holding a laser pointer, he began introducing the project. Every sentence sounded familiar. Every concept, every design philosophy, every presentation slide. I had seen them before. Because they had originally existed inside my private study. Inside the files that had mysteriously been moved. Julian spoke passionately. The greenhouse creates a borrowed landscape effect. The mountain breeze naturally improves air circulation. The viewing platform maximizes the city's skyline. The audience nodded with admiration. Several investors even applauded. Standing beside me, one of the company's vice presidents whispered, "That kid has real confidence." I answered quietly, "No. He has good memory." I kept watching. Finally, the host smiled and asked Julian one last question. "Mr. Julian, if there's one person you'd like to thank for this successful project, who would it be?" Without hesitation, Julian turned toward Jenny. His eyes filled with admiration. CEO Mu. She believed in my talent before anyone else. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here today. The audience immediately applauded. Many people smiled knowingly. Some even exchanged meaningful looks. The rumors from social media had clearly reached them. I slowly raised my hands. And clapped. Not loudly. Just enough. Julian's smile instantly stiffened. He had finally noticed me. For half a second, fear flashed across his face. I simply nodded politely, then turned around and walked away. I had already seen everything I needed to see. That evening, back at my office, I called my legal department. Retrieve every email related to this project. Every draft. Every revision. Every file timestamp. The legal director nodded. Immediately, CEO Tang. I leaned back in my chair. If someone wanted to steal my work, they should also prepare to face the consequences. That weekend, Jenny invited me to her family's dinner. Actually, her mother called personally. "Eric, it's been a long time since everyone gathered. Please come." Out of respect for her, I agreed. But the moment I entered the dining room, I understood why she insisted. Julian was sitting there, at the family table, as if he belonged. Jenny's mother smiled warmly. "Julian has helped Jenny so much lately. Such a talented young man." I quietly placed my chopsticks on the table, then asked one simple question. "Since when do outsiders attend our family dinners?" The entire room became silent. Julian immediately stood up. His face turned pale. "Auntie, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'll leave right away." He had barely taken one step, when Jenny suddenly spoke. "Sit down." Julian froze. Jenny looked directly at me. For the first time, there wasn't the slightest hesitation in her eyes. "Enough, Eric. You embarrassed him at the exhibition. You sent lawyers letters. And now you can't even tolerate him eating dinner?" I calmly met her gaze. "This isn't about dinner. It's about boundaries." Jenny laughed coldly. "You and your boundaries. In your eyes? Anyone who disagrees with you is automatically wrong." Her mother quickly tried to calm everyone. "Please. We're family. Let's not argue." But Jenny had already reached her limit. "You only care about your pride. Your rules. Your control. As long as people don't obey you, you think they've betrayed you." I quietly listened until she finished. Then asked only one question. "Finished?" She stared at me, her chest rising with anger. "No. I'm tired of living under your standards. I'm tired of your control." Those words removed every remaining doubt from my mind. I slowly reached into my briefcase, took out a prepared document, and placed it in front of her. She looked down. Her face instantly lost all color. The title read, "Divorce Agreement." She slowly lifted her eyes. "You're serious?" I nodded calmly. "I gave you chances. You chose him over our marriage. So now, sign it." The dining room became deathly quiet. No one dared breathe. Jenny stared at the papers for what felt like forever. Then suddenly, she grabbed the agreement and threw it back toward me. "I'm not signing." Her voice trembled. Whether from anger or fear, even she no longer knew. But one thing had become absolutely certain. Our marriage had reached the point of no return. Jenny's refusal didn't surprise me. If anything, I had expected it. For someone like her, admitting she was wrong was far more difficult than losing a marriage. I calmly folded the divorce agreement, placed it back inside my briefcase, and stood up from the dining table. "I won't force you today. But sooner or later, you'll sign it." Without waiting for anyone to respond, I walked out of the house. Behind me, I heard Jenny's mother calling my name. But I never turned around. Some conversations end the moment respect disappears. The following Monday, the company board held its monthly executive meeting. Every department head was present. Jenny arrived 10 minutes late. Julian followed her carrying a stack of presentation folders. Several executives exchanged puzzled glances. Although Julian worked for Jenny's design studio, he had never attended a board meeting before. Jenny noticed everyone's expressions. "He'll be assisting with today's presentation." No one objected. But I quietly noticed something else. Julian didn't ask where to sit. He already knew. He walked directly to the chair beside Jenny, as though he had done it many times before. The presentation began. For nearly 40 minutes, Jenny explained the company's newest development strategy. Whenever she paused, Julian immediately completed her sentences. He operated the presentation, answered technical questions, even corrected financial estimates. To anyone watching, they looked less like a boss and an employee, and more like business partners. When the presentation finally ended, the chairman smiled. "Excellent work." Before Jenny could respond, I slowly raised my hand. "I have one question." The conference room immediately became silent. Jenny looked at me. "What is it?" I opened a folder in front of me. According to company regulations, confidential project materials may only be accessed by authorized personnel. Julian's smile disappeared. I continued calmly. "Could someone explain why Mr. Julian's access records show more than 40 visits to my private villa over the past 2 months? The projector screen suddenly changed. A detailed security log appeared. Date, time, entry, exit, every visit, every minute. Nothing was missing. The directors looked at one another. Someone quietly counted the entries. 43 visits. Another director frowned. Most of them happened after business hours. A third executive spoke even more quietly. Some visits ended after midnight. No one said another word. Jenny's expression immediately turned cold. "You investigated me?" I looked directly at her. "No. I investigated my own property." No answer. The chairman adjusted his glasses. "CEO Mu, can you explain?" Jenny opened her mouth, then closed it again. Because she couldn't. Every excuse she had used before collapsed in front of objective records. Julian suddenly stood up. "This is my fault. I often needed quiet places to discuss designs. I asked CEO Mu for permission. You can blame me." I smiled faintly. "You misunderstand. This meeting isn't about blame. It's about compliance." I pressed another button. A second report appeared. Office access records. Building surveillance. Project file history. The timelines didn't match. Many documents had been edited at the villa, instead of inside the company. Several board members immediately became uncomfortable. One elderly director finally spoke. "This violates internal security policy." Another nodded. "And confidentiality agreements." The room grew heavier with every passing second. Jenny looked at me as if she no longer recognized the man sitting across from her. Maybe she expected another emotional argument. Another jealous husband. Instead, she found a businessman presenting evidence. No anger. No shouting. Only facts. And facts were impossible to argue with. That afternoon, the board issued an internal investigation. Julian's access to all company systems was suspended. His employee badge stopped working before sunset. Jenny stormed into my office without knocking. She slammed both hands onto my desk. "Was this what you wanted?" I calmly continued reading the document in front of me. "What exactly?" "You ruined his career." I slowly closed the file. "No. He ruined it himself. You simply gave him the opportunity." Her breathing became uneven. "For one designer. You destroyed our marriage." I looked into her eyes. "No, Jenny. Our marriage ended the day you decided another man deserved my trust more than I did." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly asked, "Is there really no way back?" I answered without hesitation. "No." She stood there, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I didn't. Finally, she turned around and left. The office door closed softly behind her. For the first time, she walked away without saying another word. But outside those doors, the real storm was only beginning. Because by evening, Julian had already posted a public statement online. And within hours, millions of people were choosing sides. By sunrise, Julian's post had spread across every major social media platform. He never mentioned my name. He didn't have to. His carefully chosen words did the work for him. Sometimes talented people become targets simply because someone more powerful feels threatened. Thousands of comments flooded in within hours. "Stay strong. Real talent is always suppressed. Powerful people always bully ordinary employees." Some even called him an inspiration. Others demanded that the company investigate me instead. For the first time in years, public opinion wasn't on my side. My assistant entered my office carrying a tablet. "CEO Tang, the media has started contacting us." I calmly continued reading the morning reports. "How many?" 37 outlets so far. "And it's still increasing." I nodded. "Ignore every interview request." She looked surprised. "We're not responding?" "Not yet." There was no point arguing with emotions. Facts all. That answer made me almost laugh. Because I knew. She had spent 10 years making me feel like I was the only one trying to hold our marriage together. And now, for the first time, she looked afraid of losing something. But I wasn't that person anymore. "Let's go inside," she said quietly. I looked at the Civil Affairs Bureau behind her. The place where my previous life had started. The place where I had signed away my happiness without realizing it. I took a deep breath. Then I said, "Willow, before we go in, I want to ask you something." She looked up. "What? Are you marrying me because you love me?" The question froze her. Her lips moved, but no words came out. And that silence was the answer. In my previous life, I ignored this silence. I convinced myself that love would come later. That patience would change everything. That one day she would look at me the way I looked at her. But 10 years proved one thing. You cannot force someone to love you. Willow looked away. "George, why are you asking this now?" "Because I was tired. Because I had already wasted a lifetime. Because this time, I wanted to choose myself." I looked at her calmly. "Because I don't want to repeat the same mistake." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. Some things were impossible to explain. How could I tell her that I had already lived 10 years with her? How could I tell her that I had already experienced the loneliness of being her husband? How could I tell her that I had watched my younger self sacrifice everything for someone who never truly chose him? I simply said, "I think we both need to think carefully." For the first time, Willow looked nervous. The woman who had always been confident around me suddenly seemed unsure. "George, are you saying you don't want to marry me?" I looked at her. In my previous life, this question would have destroyed me. But now, I calmly replied, "Maybe I'm finally asking myself whether I should." The wind passed between us. And for the first time in 10 years, Willow realized that I might really leave. The woman who finally started to fear losing me. Willow looked at me as if she had never seen me before. Maybe because, in her eyes, I was supposed to be predictable. The George she knew would always compromise. The George she knew would always wait. The George she knew would always put her first. But the man standing in front of her now was different. I wasn't angry. I wasn't blaming her. I wasn't begging her to stay. And that was what made her uneasy. "George?" Willow whispered. Her voice carried a rare hesitation. "Did something happen?" I looked at her quietly. A strange question. Something had happened. A lifetime had happened. I had spent 10 years beside her, watching her slowly build a wall between us. I had watched her smile for others but remain distant with me. I had watched her celebrate our wedding anniversary like it was just another task on a calendar. I had watched myself slowly disappear while trying to keep our family together. But I couldn't tell her any of that. So I just said, maybe I finally understood something. "What? Marriage isn't about finding someone who needs you." I paused. "It's about finding someone who chooses you." Willow's expression changed. She lowered her head and remained silent. For the first time, I saw confusion in her eyes. She wasn't used to me talking like this. In my previous life, I would have rushed to comfort her. I would have apologized even if I wasn't wrong. But now I simply stood there, waiting. After a long silence, Willow finally spoke. "George, do you regret agreeing to marry me?" I looked at the woman in front of me. The woman I once loved more than myself. The woman I once believed was my entire future. Then I answered honestly. "I don't regret loving you." Her eyes trembled slightly. "But I regret forgetting myself while loving you." Those words seemed to hit her harder than any accusation. Because there was no anger behind them. Only exhaustion. The documents in her hand became slightly wrinkled as she tightened her grip. "George?" She wanted to say something. Maybe an explanation. Maybe an apology. Maybe something she should have said 10 years ago. But before she could speak, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. A familiar name appeared. Her first love. In my previous life, this was the person who always existed between us. The shadow I could never defeat. Willow hesitated. She looked at the phone. Then she looked at me. For a moment, I thought she would answer. But unexpectedly, she turned the phone face down. "I won't answer." I was slightly surprised. Because in my memories, she never ignored his calls. Not once. Willow noticed my expression. "George, I know what you're thinking." I stayed silent. She took a breath. "I know I've made you feel like you were never important." The street became quiet. "I know I wasn't the wife you deserved." Those words sounded impossible coming from her. Because for 10 years, I had waited for exactly this. But now that I heard them, my heart was strangely calm. Willow stepped closer. "Can we start again?" I looked at her. The old me would have immediately said yes. The old me would have grabbed this chance without hesitation. But the new me knew something. A second chance doesn't mean repeating the same story. Sometimes, a second chance exists so you can finally choose a different ending. I looked toward the Civil Affairs Bureau. Then back at Willow. "I don't know." For the first time, Willow looked afraid.